Hey, good morning, folks. It is Wednesday morning, the 3rd of November, 2021. And I wanted to talk to you this morning about something that is occurring as we speak. All of the videos I've posted so far with you have been tried and proven approaches to understanding people, understanding organizations, and communicating within those organizations. What has been unfolding in the last 6 months is something now economists are starting to call the Great Resignation. I have always taken pride, especially in the last 6 years, of being on top of career development, of how people's lives are changing, especially with the entering worker, my college students. Their futures are looking quite different in terms of carving out their careers. I have to be honest with you, I did not see this great resignation occurring. And when it started happening and started being labeled that way, I was constantly attempting to gain a handle on this. Well, it is nothing new. It has just been an impetus since COVID of people being laid off, but also having to change their lifestyles during COVID gave people a chance to pause and reflect about what are they doing in their lives with their jobs and in their careers. As we have been coming out of COVID for the most part, that more people are continuing to ask those questions. The people who are asking, why should I spend 80 hours a week for an organization that does not prize me or gives me the same kind of loyalty as I give that organization? A lot more people at all levels, from entry-level people to entrepreneurs or senior managers, are starting doing some of this reflecting of what the purpose of their jobs are. Too many of us have attached a major part of our identity to the job and the quality of the work they're doing in the job. One of the saddest things as an old living dinosaur that I encounter is when I meet people my age, they start asking me or they start telling me about who they used to be based on what they used to do. Their identity was so wrapped up into their jobs and job titles that when they retired or moved on or were laid off, their identities are still locked into that old image. Long before COVID hit, it was just the tip of the iceberg, if you will. And there was an iceberg underneath that. For the last 7, 8 years, more and more people have been questioning their loyalty to organizations. Particularly millennials are saying, I don't want to do the same things in the same ways I've seen my bosses doing. I don't want to become the kind of human being my boss has become. So people are starting to question even more about where to find meaning in their careers, how to attach themselves. Here's some causes that I have gleaned from all the new research studies about what has caused the Great Resignation. Initially, some organizations and researchers said that the major cause was daycare. There were a greater proportion of women starting the Great Resignation because in their traditional roles of doing everything for everybody, that they had problems having daycare for their kids. Daycare facilities were closing up during COVID, of course, and they had problems finding people or friends to provide good daycare. They finally started seeing, balancing the ledgers, if you will, of spending so much time making a living and at the same time spending an increasing amount of their income on daycare, that they were deciding by themselves or as a family to leave their jobs and provide the daycare for them and maybe their child family members. That was one of the initial reasons for the Great Resignation. Here are some other ones that came out, especially as we came out of COVID. More organizations during COVID had their employees working remotely. And that was a big adjustment in how a lot of us worked. For example, I'm recording this on Zoom right now. Up in March 2020, I had no idea what Zoom was. By the end of March of that year, with the shutdowns, I became an expert on Zoom. So I had to update myself on that. More people were working remotely. And when they were asked to start coming back to work, or especially given no flexibility in their work settings, you have to come back full-time into your cubicle at the office. A lot of people said, no, I would like working remotely, at least part-time, and I resent people, the organization, not allowing me the flexibility to perform at my best, no matter where it is, in my cubicle or remotely. So some workers said, I like this new flexibility, and they decided to leave the organization. One thing that was happening long before COVID hit was the notion of burnout. Back in the 1980s, how to cope with burnout was one of my most requested speech topics. And in the last 6-7 years, I'm seeing that issue again. More people have been stretched too thin for so long with no end in sight. And in fact, just accelerating that trend that they started becoming burning out. That they said to themselves and to others is that things are not going to change, and I started having to take care of myself. There was work overload. They've failed that they've been stretched too thin and continually to be stretched too thin, that before they snapped, they said they had to quit and start looking at a different direction. One of the themes that I've seen coming out in different kinds of words for the Great Resignation was that workers who were resigning and looking for something other or better were losing their sense of meaning in their jobs. That they started saying, my job is a job. It is not so much my career or even my calling. That it became a job, and I'm not receiving the opportunity to meet some of my needs. The future video will start talking about workers' needs a lot more systematically. One of the things that came out by a couple different parts of research was saying that they were not receiving the emotional support to thrive in organizations. Now, some people in organizations dismiss this as whining millennials who felt that they have to have a calling and pursue their calling within the confines of the organization. And so they dismissed a lot of those requests and needs, particularly from younger workers. That one of the things that organizations have been drifting away from in the last 20 years is providing the emotional support for their people, whether it's formalized supports like employee assistance programs or creating better work environments. One thing that is coming out a lot more specifically now of why people are joining the Great Resignation was that there were lousy managers. In particular, their immediate supervisor were lousy. They were treated as robots, as replaceable tools, and these immediate supervisors, and maybe all the way up the management chain, did not have the sensitivity, the empathy, nor the communication skills to understand their people and to help them meet their own needs. What's coming up very clearly is that really good supervisors immediately supervising people have to have people skills and communication skills, not just technical expertise and experience on the job. This is a throwback to some of the needs that were identified back in the early 1990s, and we've come full circle with that. Here is a quote from the editor-in-chief of the Week magazine from the 29th of October issue in his editorial about the Great Resignation. William Falk said that in the wake of COVID, more people are reevaluating what is important in their lives. They want to get back to what he called the dignity of work. People, he said, needed to be treated with decency and respect, not as a cheap replacement cog in a vast soulless machine. He went on to say that during tedious labor with lousy pay and benefits, long hours, and little or no outstanding senses of security, people started questioning more and more, why do I need to work with the same kind of organization? Some people, he said, feel overworked, and as such, they are becoming overworked, going past work. The Great Resignation is in part a movement of workers standing up for their own well-being and dignity, which I think is a good thing, that the organization cannot solve all your problems, cannot solve your needs. You and only you can. But if the organization does not provide any kind of flexibility or structure, that gives you, the worker, of how to stay well on and off the job and have a sense of view of your career. The Great Resignation is much more about status or money. It's a questioning of the quality of our lives. As such, the Great Resignation is a symptom of something bigger that's been happening long before COVID. People are saying life is too short to work for the same company for 20 years and hoping I'll hang on until retirement. And life has to be much more than that. And our career lives have to be further integrated more intimately with the rest of our lives, since we're spending so much time commuting, thinking about working extra hours in our career area, and needs to be further integrated in our lives. So that the questioning of the meaning of the daily grind is a valid thing. Scary as it might be, more people are choosing to go in different directions, which may become an entrepreneur opening up their own long dreamed upon business, doing a series of separate gigs, short-term projects, or part-time work. They're saying might be as fulfilling with less stress for them. So they're redefining their careers. Over the last 1.5 years now of the prolonged uncertainty, we're reconsidering our priorities. And this process will last far beyond when COVID is hopefully a distant memory to us. The HUMU, H-U-M-U Corporation in Inc. Online, Incorporated Magazine Online, had some ideas of how to make more positive conclusions to this search. And I thought it was really neat stuff. They were as specific as they can. Cut your meetings short and leave time for people having play. That meetings, as you'll find out in a future video, are torture for most people. Even online meetings become torture for people. Part of this is they're saying, and they found out, is that the organization, no, let's make that more personal. Your immediate supervisors and their bosses need to acknowledge the employees' struggles, not only on the job, but in their entire lives. They were also saying we need to be more thoughtful about our communication, especially our written communication. In my business writing course, the Business 108 here at Western Nevada College, we started looking and exploring the values of learning how to write electronically or on paper about our communication. Part of what they're saying is having clear goals and increase the opportunities for ongoing learning, ongoing development, which is maybe cross-training or learning about new skills or going for some kind of specialized or advanced training. This general questioning, they concluded, of the role work plays in people's lives is an ongoing process that we have to convince all of ourselves and our people, that they're getting what they're getting each day outweighs the stresses, lost time, and foregone conclusions. Now, that conclusion may be temporary because people are going to continue asking these kinds of questions and in fact, taking charge of their careers again. Let me share with you a secret I rarely tell anybody. From over 35 years of training organizations, doing executive coaching, facilitating retreat for organizations, it dawned on me that in about 2015, that a lot of the idealistic things I was doing to help people grow in their jobs, feeling better about their self-concept in their jobs, having organizations become more compassionate and responsive. And about 2015, I came to the somber conclusion that a lot of the stuff I was doing was met on deaf ears. They brought me in for window dressing, for a symbolic value, and I became discouraged of my efforts in the 35 years before that, that might have not had the effects that I wanted. I'm seeing at this point in November of 2021 that a lot of people's rebellion by the Great Resignation are people that are considering taking charge of their careers, as David Tiedemann once said, their life careers, one word. That the more we integrate our life careers together, taking charge of that and being responsible and responsive for that, that will lead us and our families for more close, fulfilling lives. Just some thoughts about where we've been recently and where we may be going. The bottom line is you are responsible for your career. Thanks so much. Things to ponder.